I do the welcome, and then I do the pledge of allegiance and introduce you guys, and then I also do the speaker. They carry their
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to our Dassel Cokato Veterans Day program. I am Melissa Johnson, the middle school principal. I'm honored to be speaking with you today on such a special and important occasion. Thank you to our students, staff, and all of those participating in our program today and helping out. We extend a warm welcome to our veterans, family members, community members, and those joining us online. Today is the day when we set aside time to remember and salute all of those individuals who have made personal sacrifices for our country. With our middle school and high school student body, we continue to remember those who have served, those who have lost their lives, those who continue to serve, and their families for the sacrifices that they have made. To our veterans present today, thank you. Thank you for answering the call to serve. Thank you for possessing courage, pride, determination, dedication, and integrity. As we honor our service members, let's also remember the sacrifices, achievements, and courage that they needed to defend our country, not only today, but every day. As we move forward, we must continue to work together as responsible citizens for the betterment of our country. Happy Veterans Day. Please stand as our colors are marched in. You may be seated.
As we grow up and continue through our school-age years, we begin to wonder about what we can do in life. Each one of us has our own interests, and sometimes we go in different directions. A lot of those times, our decisions are made due to influences from family and friends. Chuck Stovner was no different. He grew up in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and when he turned 18, he wanted to join the Marines on a 4-year enlistment.
But my parents said, no way. You aren't going there because it's too much life and death, you know.
Chuck knew he wanted to be in the military since his dad was in the Army during World War II, serving in a role in the military police. It was in his blood.
I was full of vim and vigor and wanted to go out, and I thought I wanted to go out and, can I be honest, and kick butt.
After graduation in 1967, Stovner enlisted in the Marines for 2 years. The enlistment years were reduced for a specific reason.
They needed warm bodies to serve in the military.
After Stovner enlisted, he was sent to boot camp in San Diego, California, at Camp Pendleton. Here, he would be trained in the specialty of operating an Amtrak, which was an amphibious vehicle. Stovner was then deployed to Vietnam on December 26, 1967, and was positioned in the northern part of South Vietnam, which was close to the DMZ, or the Demilitarized Military Zone. Once he arrived, he would be placed in the infantry division of his battalion. He would soon become close with the others in his group. In fact, he was given a nickname from the group.
I was called the Fly because I was small, and at that time I was a lot quicker than I am now. I can move fast, jump, run, and I don't do that as much now. But and so it was a fun nickname.
The bond that he had with the others in his battalion would last for many years.
And then in 2008 was 40 years later, so that was the purpose or the agenda for those of us to get together that were still alive and have fellowship, have fun, have a beer or two.
In fact, at a reunion a number of years later, the bond was proven again.
From one of my reunions, this cap I got in 2008. I went to a reunion at Quantico, Virginia. As a result of being there 3 or 4 days at this reunion of those of us that were in Vietnam together, one of the guys gave me this cap, which was a kind of a memento of my time in Vietnam.
Only 3 weeks after Stovner arrived in Vietnam, his battalion was involved in the Tet Offensive, which was a major escalation and one of the largest military operations of the Vietnam War. It consisted of surprise attacks, but was eventually won by the South Vietnamese Army and the United States Armed Forces. While serving in Vietnam, there were a couple of light-hearted moments that stand out to Stovner. One of those moments was when he was in a bunker with some other soldiers, and Stovner decided to cook some breakfast with the use of C4.
So I was heating up my food. All of a sudden, bam! There was an explosion. And I thought, I equated that sound with artillery incoming, as we called it. And that sound wasn't from incoming. That was from the can of beans that I was trying to heat up. It exploded. It hit me in the head. And I put my hand up there and I said, I'm hit, I'm wounded, which was a very real possibility. And a couple of the guys that were with me on guard duty, they woke up and they said, no, Chuck, that's not blood, taste it. And here I blew up a can of pork and beans.
Another time for Stovner was when he and some other soldiers were returning from night watch and meant to light a green flare, but instead lit a red one. Colored flares were used while on night watch. Green indicated friendly, white indicated to stay away, but the situation was being resolved, and red meant distressed or warning. He quickly yelled to his other fellow Marines,
I'm not the enemy. I'm Chuck Stovner from Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I like the Green Bay Packers. I wanted to identify myself because I wasn't we had been attacked before by the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong.
After 2 years, Stovner was offered a monetary incentive and elevation in rank if he would extend for another 2 years, but he decided against it.
Thank God I never got wounded. I had no Purple Hearts. The many times there were close episodes, but thankfully I came back unscratched.
At the time of his return, Stovner thought he wasn't injured during his time of service, but 10 years ago, he found out that he had been.
I have Parkinson's disease, which because of the water I drank on several occasions, when we ran short of water, we dug for water. In a military boot, you have an insole, an insert, and that insert is kind of like a fishing net. You can strain out the bad stuff, and then my parents sent me Kool-Aid from Wisconsin, where I grew up, and the Kool-Aid flavored the water. So sometimes normally we brought a water buffalo with us, which is a tank on wheels. You do the next best thing, you dig for water. And that water, I was in an area where they used what they called Agent Orange. Thank God you don't die from Parkinson's, but it's not a good thing either.
Stovner gives his reasons for why people should serve their country.
Well, there's the obvious. Just like you're a student here at the high school, you have friendships. And in the military, like college, in high school, you have a camaraderie. And because you belong, you're a part of something that is important.
While Stovner's time of service could be described as funny, sad, and tragic, he wouldn't change anything because of his love for his family, the brothers he served with, and his country.
Thank you to the veterans that have allowed us to share their stories the last few years.
We would love the opportunity to share more stories with our students and community to show how your sacrifices have allowed us the freedoms that we have today.
We are looking for anyone who has served in some capacity, whether you were a nurse, helped with emergency responses with the National Guard, flew a helicopter, trained the soldiers, or fought in combat.
If you or someone you know is interested in being interviewed, please reach out to one or both of us. Once again, thank you, veterans.
Each year, we ask students in the middle school and high school to respond to the prompt, "What Veterans Day Means to Me." We then choose 2 of those or 3 of those students to share their essays with us here at our program. This year, we have the honor of 2 high school students and 1 middle school student. Our middle school student that will be reading first is Brooklyn Koski, followed by 2 high school students, Star Lawrence and Jaden Bosch, both seniors.
November 11th is an important day because it is a holiday that we remember and celebrate veterans. This day is called Veterans Day. Veterans Day is a very special holiday to many families, including mine. On this day, my family remembers all of my great-grandpas who were involved in protecting the freedom of 3 different countries, America, Canada, and Finland. Kenneth Paul Elmer Reisnen served in the Korean War in 1950 as a radio repairman at the age of 25. Franz Ohtama fought in the Winter War between Finland and Russia. Edwin Helmer Simonson served in the Canadian Navy, and Matti Johannes Koski contributed by building Avro Lancaster bombers in Toronto, Canada at the age of 16. My great-grandpas showed so much bravery and have passed away with many people who will remember their loyalty to our countries. Now I will tell you a little bit about this holiday's history. First of all, Veterans Day was originally called Armistice Day. The first Armistice Day was celebrated on November 11, 1918. In 1954, Dwight D. Eisenhower suggested that Armistice Day would be changed to Veterans Day. Congress agreed to pass that new law. This change was to celebrate not only World War I veterans, but those who served in other wars and who are currently serving our country. For the first 7 years, Veterans Day holidays, people celebrated this day in October. In 1978, President Gerald Ford changed it back to November to restore the holiday to its original date, which honors the start of the end of World War I. A veteran is a person who has served in the Army, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, or Space Force. As of now, about 14.5 million veterans are men, and about 1.9 million veterans are women in the USA. Some people get confused between Memorial Day and Veterans Day. Memorial Day honors those who died in military service, whereas Veterans Day celebrates all who have served, both living and deceased. 3 important symbols for Veterans Day include the red poppy, which represents the blood shed by military people, the yellow ribbon, representing support for veterans, and the American flag, which honors the service and sacrifice of all military members. An easy way to remember what day this holiday occurs is to remember that the World War I armistice was signed on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Today is a great opportunity to thank all of these important people who have done and are doing so much for the safety and freedom of our country. Thank you, veterans. In closing, I would like to share a special poem with you written by Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae in 1915, shortly before he was killed in battle. In Flanders Fields. In Flanders Fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep. The poppies grow in Flanders Fields. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is today, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, that we honor Veterans Day. I think we can all agree that we live in a world where we can take our freedoms for granted. These freedoms could include our freedom to speak, our freedom to live, and so on. But for many, these freedoms had come with a price. Veterans Day is a day in which we honor those who did pay that price. 3 important topics that will be mentioned are how we honor the service and sacrifices of our veterans, why freedom is so important, and how we can show appreciation for veterans, and not just on Veterans Day, but every day. We know the term of being a veteran. It's a person with a significant experience in a certain field, but we use the term veteran for describing those who have previously served in the military. When individuals leave for the service, they leave everything behind: their homes, their families, their safeties, and so forth, ultimately leaving to put their lives at risk. I think we don't tend to realize that those individuals in the service don't just sacrifice their lives for our country, but they sacrifice their lives for their families. The reason behind this is because they want their families to be safer. They don't want their families to question whether it's okay to live in this country or not. As previously mentioned, and as we know that those who decide to join the military leave for the service, this time frame that they could be gone for is months up to years. And because these individuals are gone for so long, the toll that comes with it can be brutal for those returning home. Returning veterans most of the time come home with scars, whether that be physical or emotional, and in most cases, it's both. Not only does this affect the veteran themselves, but also their family. Being away for so long can strain their relationships with their family and friends. The war life compared to a regular life at home is a drastic change for these veterans, and adapting to that change can be extremely difficult, and that's why their relationships could be affected. One of the most significant mental health challenges that many veterans face when returning home is PTSD, better known as post-traumatic stress disorder. This is caused by the exposure of combat trauma, horrors, and the violence that veterans have seen in their service. Those living with PTSD live with depression, nightmares, flashbacks, and aggression. And in severe cases of PTSD, it can lead to the devastating result of suicide. There is a higher risk of suicide in veterans compared to anyone else in the world. It's sad, but it's the truth that we have to live with. Knowing and honoring the sacrifices of our veterans reminds us of the true and brutal cost of the freedoms that we take for granted. These freedoms we enjoy today came with a real cost that these veterans had to pay. One of these costs is the physical sacrifices. After their service, veterans can suffer from injuries and disabilities when they return home, such as TBI, better known as traumatic brain injury. They can also deal with amputations and so on. But one of the huge costs is their life. We know that many veterans don't return home, and their loved ones now bear that cost, leaving them financially and emotionally impacted, and now having to relearn how to live life without that other person. We didn't have to pay for our freedom, our veterans did. But by doing that, veterans have shaped our world for the better. Not only have veterans shaped our world through their sacrifices, but by driving advances in medicine, technology, and leadership, which is all essential in our daily lives today. These individuals have also shaped our world by protecting our freedoms, our values, and ensuring peace during their service. Veterans created legacies of courage and commitment that continue to inspire generations today. Just look at the way that veterans have inspired us to be here today. Veterans deserve our support, and they get numerous amounts of it. We support our veterans in more ways than just one. There are medical and emotional support systems for those if they are needed, but the most important support system that veterans receive is the support from others. Holding programs like the one we are today helps bring awareness to veterans of how much support that they really have. I remember being a little sixth grader and making a little card for my grandfather on Veterans Day. To this day, he still brings it up, always with a cheerful smile. I was a sixth grader, so I didn't know how much that would mean to him. I mean, it was just a small little letter. I didn't really think about it. But this comes to show that the little things that we do in life can have a huge impact on someone else's. I have a personal connection with the understanding of the life of veterans as my grandfather served in the Vietnam War. My grandfather always told me that when he returned home from the war, that the soldiers who had fought had received hate in return. As devastating as it is, this is true. Think about not how just my grandfather felt, but how all the other soldiers who had fought in that war, knowing that they sacrificed their lives for this country, and in return, they were shown how ungrateful others were of their service. Thankfully, we had come to a realization of what these veterans did was actually for our good, and now that the support that these veterans has grown significantly. I'd like to take this opportunity to say thank you, not only to my grandfather, but to all these veterans here today. It was your sacrifices that you had made that got us where we are. As I take a look back at what Veterans Day means to me, I think about the sacrifices those had to make serving in the military, and how grateful I am to know that these veterans did their service for others and not themselves. I hope we all now have learned how to honor the service and sacrifices of our veterans, realize why freedom is so important, and how we can show appreciation for our veterans. And remember, not just on Veterans Day, but every day. We shall never forget that the freedom we love and enjoy today is a result of these veteran sacrifices. Never can I say thank you enough to all those veterans that we have today. Your service will never be taken for granted. And with that, happy Veterans Day.
When I was asked what Veterans Day means to me, When I was asked to speak for this year's Veterans Day program, they asked me, what does Veterans Day mean to me? To me, Veterans Day is a very important day of recognition, a day to honor, recognize, and respect all the sacrifices veterans make and have made in their lives so that us U.S. citizens could have the privilege of freedom in ours. My family has an extensive military background. My late great-grandfather, Robert Swanson, fought for our country in the Korean War for the U.S. Army. My uncle, Sergeant First Class Jeremy Swanson, was deployed overseas to Afghanistan as well as Cuba for the Army. Both of my parents, Specialist Christina Bosch and Staff Sergeant Sheryl Bosch, who are here with us today, met each other when they were stationed at Fort Hood, Texas. My sister, Staff Sergeant Megan Hesse, who was a graduate here from D.C., who is also here today, finished school early so that she could join the Army. She was among those who were deployed to Minneapolis for the 2020 riots. One major sacrifice my father had to make was missing the birth of his firstborn child. He did not meet me until I was over a month old, and he didn't meet me till I was over a month old, and he made that sacrifice because our country needed him. Our country was built on the backs of the brave individuals like my great-grandfather, my uncle, my mother, my father, and my sister. It is important we recognize and respect all who serve for the freedom of this beautiful country we call America. As I wrap up, I would like to personally thank everyone who has made it here today, as well as our veterans. Thank you for your service. I would also like to thank the school for letting me speak to you all here today. It has been an honor. Go Chargers.
Thank you, speakers. Would you please stand and join me and the Middle School Student Council with the Pledge of Allegiance? To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, a nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. This afternoon, we get the honor and privilege of having Jeff Horick join us as our keynote speaker. Jeff is a member of our local American Legion post and currently serves as the Sergeant at Arms. Jeff enlisted in the Marine Corps in 1974 after completing one semester at Midland Lutheran College. After his service, he graduated from college and pursued a 40-year career in human resources with 3M Company. While serving, Jeff was stationed at 8th and I Marine Barracks in Washington, D.C., where he was accepted into Company B Marine Corps Body Bearers Section. Almost every day, in teams of 6, the body bearers carry the caskets of fallen Marines to their final resting place at Arlington National Cemetery. The mission of the body bearers states, this elite unit is comprised of hand-selected candidates who, after completing ceremonial drill school, hone their minds and bodies to recreate themselves into members of the most elite funeral detail in the United States Armed Forces. Jeff's service included ceremonial details at the White House, preparing for presidential, state, and joint service funerals, and participating in wreath-laying ceremonies in our national capital. The mental, emotional, and physical toll this responsibility takes, as well as the immensely gratifying experience, allows the body bearer to proudly use their motto, the last to let you down. Please welcome Jeff Horick.
Thank you, Alyssa. Good afternoon. On behalf of the American Legion Post 364 and Post 209, thank you for being here on this day of honor and remembrance. I want to first mention that I'm here today as a replacement for Paul Francois, who was the original speaker scheduled. Several weeks ago, Paul fell, so I ask that you keep Paul and his wife Lori in your thoughts as he recovers. I'm privileged to be speaking with you on such an important occasion. We are here today to honor our service members and to remember the sacrifices that they made and the courage it took to defend honor, duty, and country. We're here today to honor heroes, to remember their achievements and dedication, and to say thank you for their commitment. We are here in the midst of patriots and the family and friends of those that have served. I'd like to ask that the service members and the veterans that are here today stand if you are able. Thank you for answering the call of duty. You have made our armed forces one of the most respected in the world. Thank you. You can be seated. Now I'd like to ask family members of any service member to stand. We know you have lived through difficult times and often taken the heavy load to keep the home fires burning. Thank you for what you have done. To all the students here today, I remember when I was younger, growing up in a small town, watching my father, who was a Navy veteran, put on his original military uniform for a Veterans Day program just like this one. He was proud, partly because he could squeeze in to that uniform, but mostly he was proud because he served. I was, as a kid, proud. Today that we gather at schools and auditoriums, cemeteries and monuments across the country, in cities large and small, from Hawaii to Virginia, from Texas to Minnesota. And we do these things to honor the loyalty and the bravery of those who have served and those who have fallen while serving this nation. This day is spent recalling the valor of men and women who died in combat, as well as all of those who have served in any and every capacity. While those who died in combat made the ultimate sacrifice, all who served have made sacrifices by leaving their homes, their families, their careers, and serving in unknown and dangerous situations. Many came home to festivities, yet many were not welcomed with celebrations. So many mothers and wives, fathers and husbands, brothers and sisters, and sons and daughters did and do their duty each day to ensure that their loved ones are cared for and remembered. Families carry an understanding that their soldier has chosen of life, of risk, and sacrifice for the sake of freedom. They carry on each day with pictures and text and folded flags on mantles, things that sometimes become mementos of lives not fully lived. As mentioned in the introduction, in my time in the United States Marines, I served as a body bearer in Washington, D.C. Our mission as body bearers was to perform flawless funerals for fallen Marines with the utmost honor, dignity, and respect, not only for them, but for their families. It was the most humbling and honorable thing I've done in my life. I'm not telling you this because I'm someone special or I'm looking for special recognition. That's not what we do. We, all past, present, and future body bearers, would politely ask that you never consider us, but simply ask that you remember and honor the fallen and their families. While serving at Arlington National Cemetery, I performed hundreds of funerals. I folded hundreds of flags. I saw hundreds of families have one of, if not, their worst day of their lives. I saw the sadness, the grief, the tears. But there was something else. Something you can't see. Something only one can feel. And that was their pride. Pride knowing that their loved ones served this nation to preserve our freedom, the freedom of all Americans, a freedom that was more important than themselves. At Arlington National Cemetery, or at Fort Snelling National Cemetery in Minneapolis. Those perfectly aligned rows of simple markers symbolize our freedom. They testify to honor fulfilled and duty served. Many of those markers stand over the graves of Americans who returned home to enjoy the peace that they had earned. Too many of them stand over the graves of those who gave their lives for that peace. The peace each of us here today too often take for granted. Veterans Day is dedicated to all who've answered the call to serve, whether they live in honor among us or sleep in valor beneath sacred ground. While we stand with veterans from all eras who have returned home, we must also recognize and continue to fight for those still waiting to come home. Tens of thousands of American service members remain missing today. Of those, 33 are from Minnesota. We must not forget them, as their families have never forgotten them, as they live for generations without answers. It is our responsibility as citizens to remember the nation's brave fallen men and women, whether they died on foreign soil or in the heat of battle, or after serving a lifetime in uniform, or returning to live as civilians. Never forget these men and women who know all too much the cost of our freedom, for their service is a great gift. Today's troops continue to follow in the footsteps of generations of soldiers, and today's troops need to be honored as well. My service to this country allowed me to participate in and experience something unique. I was able to be a part of ceremonial and security details for dignitaries and large crowds. However, the extreme honor of being part of a team that hands a folded flag to a grieving family is much more humbling than pomp and circumstance could ever be. In a few minutes, our Legion members will fire a 21-gun salute. And as the bugle sounds taps, I ask you all to remember our American Armed Forces and the traditions handed down to them by American veterans. That small act and your presence here today, and that of people gathered across America, is a tribute to our fallen heroes and is an honor to our current soldiers and all the veterans. It is our way of saying, we remember and we thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. We'll now hear from our chamber choir, led by Miss Weeding. God bless America. Students, staff, community members, and most importantly, veterans, again, thank you. It is absolutely an honor and a privilege to express our gratitude today for your sacrifice and your service. Thank you for the commitment you made, but also for your continued example of leadership and dedication. At this time, I'd like all in attendance to please rise, remove your hats as our Cokato American Legion Post leads us through the rifle volley. Please be seated. And now we will hear from our high school band playing External Father, Strong to Save, led by Aaron Bonert. I'd like to personally thank our veterans who are with us here today and thank them for their service to our country. Veterans, please wave as your name and branch is read. Audience, please hold your applause until all names have been read. Ken Aho, Army. Mark Eiley, Army. Michelle Eiley, Army. Chuck Eiley, Army. Steve Breck, Army. Dennis Berglund, Army. Dennis Compton, Air Force. Rick Erickson, Army. Dan Faust, Marines. Jeff Horick, Marines. Dave Wico, Navy. Ron Hungerford, Navy. Dennis Johnson, Army. Dan Jones, Navy. Jim Karnick, U.S. Marine Corps. Craig Kay, Army. Fred Kilpala, Army. Marlo Knuth, Navy. David Lieneman, Army. Josh Liminen, Army. Mark Olson, Navy. Ed Otto, Army. Nancy Piepenberg, Navy. Daniel Rinden, Army. Lee Rosenquist, Navy. Dale Sedegren, Army. Raleigh Severson, Air Force. Owen Stonelake, Army. Charles Stovner, Marines. Dean Svella, Army. Melvin Turning, Army. Harley Wilson, Army. Kevin Wilson, Army. Paul Chadwick, Army. Ralph Benner, Army. Howard Norberg, Army. Peggy Carlson, Auxiliary. Marianne Ryan, Auxiliary. Sharon Linnenan, Auxiliary. Mary Ackerman, Auxiliary. Cliff Nicholson, Army. Christina Bosch, Army. Megan Hesse, Army. Cheryl Bosch, Army. Ralph Kilpala, Navy. Dale Gage, Army. And Justin Cassette, Army. Please give them a round of applause. Now our high school band will play Armed Forces Salute. Please feel free to stand as you are able and/or wave and be recognized with your branch and service. Please rise as our colors are retired by Dassel American Legion Post 364. Please be seated. Again, one last time, thank you for being here today and giving us the opportunity to honor you. At this time, I'd like to invite our student council down to the floor just to form a tunnel here for our veterans. I would ask that all other students remain where you are as our veterans in attendance and their guests begin to make their way to our community room for our reception. Please use the door and to the corner to my immediate left. If you are not staying for the reception, we do ask that you wait to depart until our buses have left the parking lot. With that, thank you for coming. Veterans and guests, please make your way to our community room. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Good job.
Nice job.
This is always a really nice ceremony, and we appreciate it. Those are students, and they're intimidating. They can't walk. I'm glad I wasn't following.
Right. Yes, thanks for being here.
Great weather.
Yeah.
Where our flags are. We have flags that are supposed to be here, maybe right now.
High school students, please remain seated and where you currently are. At this time, I'd like to ask the lower half of the bleacher section to my immediate left to make their way back to the middle school. So this lower half of this section, start making your way back to the middle school through the far door down on this corner. Or all of you.